That's with Team 4545 League, analyzing the game between VA Knight and Insan 996, played in Team Event 53, under 1600 section in the 4th round. Okay, we've got a Birds, and now it's the Larson Bird, or Bird Larson, and it's a very interesting opening. I've used it a number of times myself. In the Stonewall Dutch, which is similar to this opening with colors reversed, a lot of times the Queen's Bishop is not very active. It just gets blocked in by all the pawns. So here it's found a good diagonal. How can Black deal with this? Pretty much any setup Black does should be okay, as long as he's getting developed. So we'll just kind of follow through and see what happens. We follow similar patterns of a Dutch defense, and again, if you develop, anytime you develop, you're generally going to have a very playable game. So it's not important to know all the intricate lines of analysis that can exist on this. It's just important to get your pieces out, and Black is doing that. Well, so is White. Okay, so now this is an interesting move. Let's look at some of the choices Black has here, and I'll just talk briefly just a moment about this move, pawn takes. Okay, what this does is it seeks to make exchanges, and Black can play directly Bishop D3, and that's going to force an exchange. Now, White does have one thing he wants. He's getting his knight into E5, but he also has a backward pawn on the open file. Now, that's not necessarily a critical weakness. White should be okay out of that. Just to give you a sample line, we'll just take and take. Now, notice that D4 is a move that White will probably want to play. That would just eliminate the weakness. It again has some pluses and minuses to it. It kind of activates this bishop a little bit, and it might be that Black can get some activity on that diagonal at some point that the king is on. We don't know. But right now, White's achieved his aim. He's got a knight anchored into E5, and Black may have to just stop and take it. Okay, and but then look at the position. White has his pawn chain in the center of the board is all on the same color of his bishop, and so Black's might have. The bishops are about equal. In an ending, the Black bishop could be a little bit better, but right now the Black bishop is kind of tied up. It's stuck behind the pawn on C5. But if White ever breaks with D4, that Black bishop comes into play. So here it's Black to move, and all he needs to do is find a decent developing move, and Queen D5 is certainly looks fine. White's not going to drive that queen out too easily, unless he sticks a rook on D1 and plays D4, but Black has time to remedy that. So like for instance, let's just go ahead and play rook AD1, and since Black sees the C file opening up, he'll put a rook there. Now we'll play D5, and this is just a fantasy line. I'm not sure if it's the best line. White has a choice here. He could take with the bishop, and he's eyeballing A7 with a discovery. Or he could take with the rook, and then the queen could run over to A5 and be attacking a pawn in turn. So what's to say? Who's to say which is better? Maybe on bishop takes with the idea of discovery, we go queen A5 anyway, and the game looks about even. And suddenly the Black bishop has got a little more prospects than it did a while ago, and it's a playable game, and Black should be happy with the draw, especially with a rating disadvantage. So let's just go back. And D4, I can't criticize that move. It's perfectly logical. It shuts in the dark squared bishop that White owns, but it kind of comes at a little bit of a price, because D4 can't be supported by a pawn, and that's because of the White pawn on F4. It's stopping Black from getting E5 in. And Black's going to be kind of tied down a little bit on the D4 square here. And here Black has, but just one point. This was a reasonable choice, because it trades some wood off, and it also opens up a line for this bishop. and that bishop doesn't have much activity. But once again, after d3, black is going to have to fight to hold on to that square, and it does become a problem for him in a little bit. Okay, so let's just see what did happen. Okay, so he took with the pawn, and now he attacks a pawn, but at the same time he unprotects a pawn. But that's okay. We can trade those, and it reaches a interesting imbalance. But white has time to take care of that, but he actually chooses not to. So perhaps this is the point where white should have gone ahead and captured, and I'll show you why. I mean, black should have captured. Okay, what does white do? Okay, if he takes on d4 with his knight on f3, he's uncovering an attack on the bishop. Well, we can live with that. Okay, black has some happy choices here. Okay, you don't have bishop e3 check, unfortunately, but you do have, in this situation, you do have queen b3, and this makes a huge difference on a lot of things. Okay, it pins the knight, and oh wait, you can't do that. The rook hangs. I'm sorry. The bishop on f4 hangs. So you got to deal with the bishop. You can go ahead and take here first, but this might drop the other bishop. But you know, it's something that I think that black can live with. You know, here you have bishop e5, and that pins the knight. Okay, so then. Yeah, this is what I was thinking of. I was looking at earlier. Now, if knight takes f5, you just answer with bishop takes b2, rook b1, and white doesn't really have a lot to show here. The bishop will go to c3, and it's going to be checking on d4 as soon as white moves his knight to safety. Okay, so I think black is okay here. White does have his queenside pawn majority still, but black should be okay here and survive. So instead, he played knight g4. So I think he probably could have got away with bishop takes f4. And this looks good, and it seems reasonable. Black will have pinning possibilities if white captures on d4, and certain tactics that we're all familiar with against the enemy king, where we can give a smothered mate. Some of those things could arise. And here I think black should have just gone ahead, and if he committed to that move, let's just go ahead and look at this. What does it do? Okay, it's attacking a queen, it's attacking a rook, so for white to justify this, he needs to take. Now, that pawn does look weak, but at the same time, it's a little bit of a strength. How does white deal with this? Okay, for the first thing I'd like to point out is that the f4 pawn is hanging, so white has to stop and deal with that, and that's not all that easy. You can't play g3 because the bishop takes h3. So the only logical move seems to be knight e5. Okay, now what knight e5 does is it stops the bishop from taking it, but black's fine here. And I'll show you that the most logical move is to just go ahead and take the knight. And now white has two ways to recapture. Let's take with the bishop just for the sake of argument. And now we sink the knight in on d4. And black's looking okay here, in my opinion. That knight is a little bit of a pillar of strength. And black has a threat. Knight takes e2 check, queen takes e2, and bishop takes d3. So white has to deal with that threat, right? What's white going to do? He can move his rook to e1 to avoid some of that, but he's still going to drop the pawn on d3. So it seems to me that maybe what white has to do, and I'm not sure if this is forced, the players can tell us, is just go for this line. And now, what's white got to show for his trouble? He can't play bishop f3 here because e2 discovered check ends the game immediately. So white's only hope to try to prove white wrong here, or prove black wrong here, is to try to surround and win this pawn. And that could be easier said than done. Again, there's some tricks in here that black can employ. We'll just go after D3, which is weak. Okay, and by going after D3, how's white going to justify this? Ideally, you'd like to play Queen C1 to surround that, but after bishop takes D3, well, I'll just show you. After bishop takes D3, rook takes on E3. Black has just happily traded some pawns off, and actually he's winning a piece here because the rook can't take on E2. It's pinned. So the only other thing white can try is to allow bishop takes D3 and then try to pin it. So we have to move the queen somewhere else. So we put it there. Now if bishop takes D3, rook here, but black has a resource once again, queen E4, and black has done fine here. Okay, so let's just play it out. And black can't be worse in this position. The logical move is to play queen D4, and black is fine. Okay, so this didn't happen. Fortunately, both sides are taking their time. But oops, I went too far back. Dang it. Okay, we're probably around move. Let's just go forward 45 and see what that does. No, I went too far back. 15. What? Okay, that's not quite back. 6. Okay, good. Okay, here we are. So I'm saying that after H3, black should go ahead and try knight E3, and that pawn on E3 is not all that weak, and black gets plenty of activity as I showed. But I could be wrong. There could be a simple move I'm missing. But what this has done is it's taken 2 moves for black to go ahead and do this, and in turn handed the move to white. And so it was the same position just a while ago with this pawn back on H2, but black to move. Now it's the same position, and black's saying, okay, if you'll play H3, it's my move, but I'll pass, and you can play H3 as long as H3 is your first move, then I'll give you a second move on top of that. That's in effect what's happened. And then white says, well, this will be my second move. And here black's willing now to allow these pawns to be doubled because he gets an open file, and that seems reasonable. I won't examine all the possibilities due to time constraints. I want to get to some more important points here. And this is fine. White gets his king off that diagonal. We saw there was always some potential pitfalls with the king being on that G1 A7 diagonal, and now black supports his pawn with a minor piece. And here comes a normal thematic move that we see in the Dutch and in the birds. The queen's trying to transfer to the queen side. And I guess here black decided that he didn't want the double pawn on F5. He'll just take a double pawn on H6. But now white's starting his pawn storm. But it comes at a slight price. The white king is a little more exposed than the black king at the moment, but black isn't really poised to take advantage of it. So black continues his development, and so does white. Now this was the critical point of the game. It just led to black having a couple of weaknesses that he couldn't do anything with. Simple and logical to play here is A5, and it's a positional move. It's designed to restrain white from playing B4. And then what does black do to follow up? Well, he'll probably stick a knight in on B4 eventually. Once he gets D4 a little covered, rook 8 can go to D8. It was black's best move here because what maybe he was afraid of this. Well, I mean, but really, okay, just take it. And then we take with the pawn, and then we put the bishop here and offer to trade it. Now there could be some tricks in here and some pitfalls that maybe black wasn't comfortable with, but I think he survives this. I think that in some cases the white king is more exposed, as I said, than the black king. So, and if white does this and then tries to attack on the G file, he can't play f6 here, black will just take on h3 and have a nice follow-up. So black should be totally fine here, and white's not attacking or crawling all over d4 like he was. And anyway, he didn't do it. Something for him to analyze on his own. But what h6 does, the problem with h6 is it just creates two weaknesses immediately in the black position, and the black game just falls apart. And this is just common sense. Now black's got double pawns. The pawn on g6 is weak. It can't be protected by a pawn. It wouldn't be so weak if the black pawn was on h7, but it moved to allow this to happen. Now also the black pawn on e6 is weak, and white has now two weaknesses to focus in on and see what he can do. So maybe black needs to shift his strategy and try to play for e5 to get rid of that weak pawn, but let's see what white does. And notice both sides have used a lot of time and are really in time trouble. White has just over 2 minutes and black 6 minutes, and fortunately they get that 45-second increment. Now g5 is good. It seems to take away the option of going to getting. I was going to say that g5. It takes away the option of that knight. Where can it go? It can't really go to h. Well, it could. Black could try knight h5, and here I'll show you. Okay. Now you see that this pawn is weak. Well, then just take this. I was looking at queen h4 and g6, and then if pawn takes pawn, we just let that pawn sit there and collect it later. But white has this move. Well, we might be able to transpose. It's a little shaky, but it might work. And the idea is you're going to win this pawn much later when it's safe. So anyway, black tried this, and now all three kingside pawns of black's are weak because none of them could be protected by a pawn. Unless black plays h5, then that pawn is a little safer. But there's just some fundamental weaknesses. There's backward pawns on the open file. It's just kind of sticky here. So queen g7 attacks a pawn, which black has to deal with. And it's kind of a shame black has to tie his queen up just to guard a pawn. Maybe, well, knight e7 just blocks the second rank, and you still have to deal with that. But so for now, it's okay. And now the king's coming up, getting himself a little more exposed than he was back when black underwent this operation with h6. So white's gained a lot of space here, a lot of good territory. Okay, so this is logical. If anything, you're threatening to go down here and win a pawn, or win this pawn. So what does black do? Maybe he needs to play rook ad8 to secure d4, but he chooses this move, and now this is planning b4. So maybe this is the time black needs to play a5, and he does. Okay, so now white stops here and attacks g6. So black has to stop and deal with that. And I don't know, maybe knight f8 would have been preferable, but then that knight doesn't really have a good prospect. Doesn't really have a good prospect where it was. It needs to get into play by f6. And this makes sense. Well, let's see. We're not yet attacking d4, but white's going to do that. Okay. So now he's got time for b4. And doesn't matter if he takes first. c5 is coming, and now d4 is getting undermined. And now the bishop's we could take with the bishop and be okay, but the knight taking is fine also. Just look at all the discoveries white's threatening. Now all the black pawns on white squares, they're all weak, and white's got this really strong position, and black's just falling apart. And comes back, and queen e4, that crawls all over e6, keeps the pressure on g6, and black's just kind of shuffling around, trying to hold on. And now this pawn goes, and here's an interesting position. White to play and do the best you can. Pause the video. Alright, you back? Did you solve it? Okay, it's a pretty elementary thing. I guess white missed it. He had time on his clock. Let's see. He spent, he went at 21 seconds, so he spent 24 seconds on the move. And there's nothing wrong with the move he played, but, you know, if you see a piece, take it. At least analyze it. What does black do here? He is in check, and he has one legal move. One. That's it. The king can't go anywhere. E7's covered. G7's covered. So he has to play this, and then that's mate. So white missed that, but these things happen. But again, what he played is fine. It works. You just try to play the best moves every time if you can, because they're not always going to be checkmates that you're missing. And when you're playing a really, really strong player, if you keep making little mistakes, they'll catch up to you at some point. Okay. So, like I say, nothing wrong with the move he played. White just got this incredible position now, and little check to get, and but not much else of a follow-up. And black's only down a pawn, but positionally he's essentially slaughtered here. Now his king is the one that's exposed when it was white's earlier, and I wouldn't be surprised if black didn't. White doesn't have another checkmate at some point. You know, this is a threat. Rook A7 check, winning the knight because you can't block on C7. You know, it's just getting gruesome. Okay, so when in doubt, trade. But not, white just declines it and checks the other direction. And really, there's nothing black can do. White just starts finding good moves. Now, King H7, now or H2, and now the G rook is no longer pinned, so it's going to come into play. And I don't know, maybe the rook would have been better going to A2. No, it wouldn't necessarily. But the idea is that somehow maybe we can liquidate and save this somehow. I don't know how. Probably the most dangerous piece to get rid of is the white queen. This doesn't necessarily force the queens off, but if white trades, maybe black's got a chance to survive. But then white's got those connected passed pawns over there on the queen side. I don't know. But anyway, rook A4, and now white just says, here, have a pawn. I'm going to deflect your queen away. And now you see the intent to give a check here. Now the the pawn is regained with tempo, with check, and the rook gets picked up, and white trade queen just collect the knight, or well, this still wins. It doesn't matter. But white's a rook ahead, and it's just a matter of time before something bad's going to happen. Okay, very good game, VI Knight. You handled it well after the critical point. Insan 996, you did okay for a while, and hopefully there's some ideas in there for both of you to improve this opening, and I wish you both luck next time. And for all of you that watched the video, thanks so much for taking the time, and I'll be back soon with another. Take care.